லயனல் போபகே அவர்கள் ஆஸ்திரேலியாவில் நீண்ட காலமாக வாழ்பவர். ஒரு சமூக செயற்பாட்டாளராக பெரும்பான்மை இனத்தைச் சேர்ந்தவராக இருந்தாலும் அங்குள்ள அரசியல் நிலவரங்களை நன்கு அறிந்தவர். ஜேவிபியினுடைய அங்கத்தவராக இருந்தவர் என்று அறிகிறேன். Welcome, Lionel Bopagae.
Thank you very much. I am grateful to Inpa Tamil Oli Radio for giving me this opportunity.
To start, can you give a brief background of yourself and your involvement in social activities and especially Sri Lankan politics and affairs?
Well, as you correctly said, I was the General Secretary of the JVP for some time previously. And I was also behind bars for 3 times in Sri Lanka due to the first time it was the 1971 uprising of the youth in the south of Sri Lanka. Then in 1983, I was detained for on the pretext that we were behind the 1983 July Black July program, which was completely false. And then in 1985, again, I was detained, saying that I was conspiring to topple the government in collaboration with Tamil militants. So, and I am in Melbourne. I had to leave Sri Lanka in 1989 because my family, including myself, we were under death threat, and we had to leave Sri Lanka. So we are here in Australia now, and I am involved in many activities here, Australian as well as I'm very close to what is happening in Sri Lanka, and yeah.
With your background and the experience you had with JVP and the Sri Lankan political setup, what do you think the current situation where it is actually going towards a change, or how do you look at this particular protest and the things happened so far? What's your view on this?
Especially, I think we have to go back probably a couple of decades and say, I will go back to Chandrika's time when she was president. And she came to power on the promise that they will adopt a federal solution to address the issues of the Tamil-speaking people in Sri Lanka. And they couldn't do that. Chandrika couldn't do that because Mahinda Rajapaksa and them, who were within the SLFP at that time, they opposed any such concession. And I had to leave JVP because the JVP was moving away from their previous policy positions. When I was in the JVP, this is after 1971 insurrection, and when we came out in 1977, and I was there till January 1984, and we were advocating equal rights to Tamil people, and we accepted the right to self-determination of Tamil people in Sri Lanka. And our solution should be based on the right to self-determination, but we didn't advocate for separation. What we said is basically that we all should work to live in Sri Lanka as equals, with dignity, with respect. And that was our policy position. And but then they changed the position in 1983. It was in July itself, and so I had taken a decision to leave the JVP, and then I was detained on the pretext that we were behind the program, Black July program. And then I came out in 1984, January or February, I was released, and I resigned from the JVP since then. The JVP went on a very, very opportunistic line, taking a very strong nationalist stand. And at certain times, they were racist. I would say they were communalist. And so they were basically at that time competing with Sinhala nationalist currents led by Cyril Matthew, the UNP, and others. So they were competing with the same base of the JVP. So opportunistically, they changed their position. I won't brand them as fundamentalist racists, but their positions changed, and they were opportunistically using nationalism, Sinhala Buddhist nationalism, for their political advantage. And then again, after some time, I think after 2005, they became worse nationalists. They were the people who brought Mahinda Rajapaksa to power. And without their support, Mahinda Rajapaksa wouldn't have been in power. And they brought, and then LTT also contributed in the sense that they advocated boycotting the elections, which helped them. And now what happened is, after that, JVP says they are not racists, they are not fundamentalists, but if you listen to some of the speeches that are coming out of some of the leaders, I still wonder whether they understand or grasp, whether they are able to grasp the fundamentals of the national question in Sri Lanka, the issues that the Tamil-speaking people in Sri Lanka are faced with.
Since independence, this nationalism actually created to this extent. I mean, that's what our understanding. And also, you said JVP was for self-determination, not for separation. So how do you look at the LTT uprise and asking for a separate state? What actually that self-determination was denied? That was the reason the separatism started, I think. Well, how do you look at the LTT's fight for freedom or a separate state?
Now, actually, if we look at the history of nationalism in Sri Lanka, it all started in 1948 itself. With the establishment of the United National Party government, they disenfranchised the Malaya workers, and they were ultimately, some of them were sent back to India by the Sirima Sastry Pact and whatever, they did later. That was the very initial step that, the nationalist currents in Sri Lanka took. Then in 1952-53 period, SWR Bandaranaike established what they call Sangaveda Guru Govikam Karu Peramuna, that is uniting all the forces, and formed MEP, Mahajana Eksat Peramuna, which was led by Sri Lanka Freedom Party. Now, the issue was they used Sinhala only policy to come to power. That was a very opportunistic move by SWR Bandaranaike, because he was the person in 1944 or 45 in one of the Ceylon National Congress. At that time, there was no UNP. United National Party was the outcome of the Ceylon National Congress. And in Ceylon National Congress, when J.R. Jayawardena proposed that Sinhala should be made the official language of Sri Lanka, SWR Bandaranaike was the person who opposed it in 1945. And then in 1952-53 period, he brought out this slogan, opportunistic. He is not a fool. He knew what he was doing, and that is the main issue that gave rise to this situation. I mean, I won't blame the Tamil community, because if you look at, I think I remember Chavakachery elections. It was a by-election probably, and I remember Professor C. Sundaralingam contesting that election, and he was the first person to put the slogan of a separate state, and Tamil people didn't vote for him. His deposit was lost, right? So we have to think, as Sinhalese, as non-Tamil speaking people, we have to think, how did these Tamil people who opposed separation in the 1950s came to this situation afterwards? Why were they demanding a separate state? Because they had to go through a violent process. I still remember in 1952, I was a child. In 1952, or in 1956, when Sinhala language was made the official language of the country, the federal party leaders made a peaceful protest in Goldface Greens, where today Gota Go Home is protests are there, right? And when that peaceful protest, I think there were about 200 odd people, and Bandaranaike used thugs led by Rajaratna, who became a government MP, and that was the first time in Sri Lanka a peaceful protest was attacked, assaulted using thugs because the police refused to take orders to attack a peaceful protest.
Do you think the general Sinhalese public, I mean, intellectuals do understand, and they, like you, they actually agree with LTTE, or self-determination was not, that's what they are fighting for, and they are asking for a separate state. But until this Go Home Gota protest started, the Sinhala people were not really keen or caring about this. They thought that Rajapaksa family won a war and they have eliminated evils like that. Now, this particular protest, has it changed the minds of the general Sinhala public that they have done something wrong, or these guys have misguided them?
Yeah, to a certain extent, that is true. I mean, the perceptions among the Sinhala people about what happened during this period, especially during the wartime, that has changed. And now what is happening, what has happened during 71, 88, 89, sort of in the South, the military was used and crushed, all the people, so many people were made to disappear, so many people were killed. And similar things happened to the Tamil people for such a long time, for 30 years. So now the Sinhala speaking people, because there was a lot of propaganda propagated by the Rajapaksa regime during the war, and also some of the foolish things that the militants did, the exploding bombs for some reason or other in the South, and those things created an advantageous situation for the Rajapaksa regime to carry out their propaganda. And now they have come to some understanding, no, there is something behind, because these are the regimes who divided the people of Sri Lanka along ethnic lines, along religious lines, and that disunity has disappeared to a certain extent. And that is a good thing, positive thing. But I am not in a position to say that they understand the problems that gave rise to the issues, the militancy, the separatist movement. I don't think they understand properly, but this is a good opportunity for both communities to understand each other. Because of language barriers created in 1956, I don't think both communities understood each other well. Sort of there was no link language. English, we were not able to speak English. So the Tamil community on the one hand, sort of I can understand, their frustration due to what happened. They only to a certain extent express solidarity with what is happening in the South at the moment, and which is understandable, because the repercussions of a defeat of the protest will come back to haunt the Tamil speaking people. They will be the first to suffer.
Correct.
The second thing is, say, if the protest movement is victorious in the South, whether they will again forget the problems of the Tamil speaking people. So this is a reasonable thing for Tamil speaking people to think about. And on the other hand, it is up to the Sinhala speaking people in the South to convince that we are not going to do that. We understand your issues. We have to address those issues, and we have to live as a united people, but as equals, with dignity, with respect, and in an inclusive environment.
Yeah. Now, in this particular protest, there are some signs of that understanding is there. For example, when you said Sinhala only rule or the law was passed by SWRD Bandaranaike, where in this protest, one of the young guy actually blindfolded Bandaranaike's statue. That's one. And Sinhala protesters made the national anthem to be sung in Tamil as well. That was originated by Sinhala youths, not by any Tamils or anything like that. What do you think from here onwards? Now the Rajapaksa family is in hiding, and Gotabaya Rajapaksa is trying to keep calm and cool and try to be in there. He is not resigning. He is not willing to resign. There may be some personal reason that he will be in more trouble. He's actually wanted to use his immunity to get away from trouble for a shorter period or something. So what do you think from here? What can we both Sinhala and Tamil community can do? What's your suggestion or
thought? Yeah, before coming to that issue, I need to make a comment about what is happening in the south with regard to destruction of property. There are different interpretations about that. One is that it is not the protesters who are setting fire to properties. It is the government forces itself trying to create a situation so that they could bring military rule in the south, right? So that Rajapaksas could stay in power. And the way things happened in Sri Lanka immediately after the repression of the protest movement in Goldface and the Mainagama, sort of within a day, most of the properties of the government MPs and so on, they were destroyed. They have set fire and all that. You can see there was nobody injured. There were no family members. There were, so even servants were not there, right? So, and the way, if you look at the Nisanka Senadipati, who is the chief of avant-garde, they had people from prisons employed elsewhere. It was a government contract signed between avant-garde and the prisons department. I don't know whether there is an official agreement, but those people are all over the island. They could be used to do anything that the government wants to do, to set fire, to attack people. And there is strong evidence that some of those people have been used in this way. So that is just to clear that, because I don't blame the JVP or the Frontline Socialist Party for whatever happened, because there is a strong tendency to do that. Now, with regard to what we can do from here, I think basically we have to somehow or other bring diaspora together. Bring diaspora together as a Sinhala-speaking community, Tamil-speaking community, and even there are Muslims, there are Burghers, say in Australia, for example. We have to come together. And if we come together, there are so many advantages. One, we become strong, we become more effective, we become more effective in our advocacy with regard to, say, for example, with regard to the current situation, current crisis in Sri Lanka, financial, economic, medical, whatever field, there is crisis everywhere. In that situation, say, for example, if there is a change of government tomorrow, right, we have to take the first steps to help the people come out of this crisis. And how can we do that unless we are united, right? As a united force, we can advocate the foreign governments, the United Nations, even the diaspora among ourselves, that we need to help these people come out, and we need to contribute in the best way possible through policy formulation, developing programs to help those people. So we can contribute a lot. I mean, say, in the diaspora, there are more specialized people than those who are in Sri Lanka. There are more people who are much more experienced than those people in Sri Lanka. Our diaspora has been brought up in an environment of inclusiveness, in respecting the other, in tolerating different views. sort of that sort of environment, which will be very useful in the current context of Sri Lanka.
I mean, that unity part is very, very essential. As you said, the diaspora can build that country very fast and very efficiently with all the expertise and funding availability and everything. But when you say the diaspora, okay, we start to unite and talk together. Only the Tamil people or the Tamil diaspora, they always talk about the past experience. We can unite. What are we going to get? What about the losses and what really happened to us? Are we going to get a bit of a compensation in a manner to securely, with self-determination, the Tamil people in North and East can live peacefully together with Sinhala and in one country, two nations type of setup or state type of setup. I mean, it's not a condition I'm just putting. I mean, I've been talking to the Tamil diaspora a lot. So they fear this unity is only to build the country or get our support to build up again. And from our past experience, we will be hammered again, or we won't get anything out of it type of thoughts in Tamil's mind. How can you clear that part of it?
What we have proposed from here in Australia, what we have proposed is, even at the stage of new constitution development in Sri Lanka, sort of during the interim, whatever they set up, interim government or whatever, they are doing it at the moment, and which I don't have much trust. But still, they will go through this internal interim arrangement. And then when there is an opportunity for the formation of constitution, what we are demanding is to go for a constitutional assembly, which should be elected from people and representing the people who have all these issues, including the Tamil people, including the Muslim people. There should be representation and their issues need to be addressed. What we advocate is accepting the right to self-determination. Of course, as an individual, I advocate right to self-determination of Tamil-speaking people. And from the 1970, if you look at the policy declaration made by the JVP in 1972, we accepted that there should be autonomy to the Tamil people, right, in Sri Lanka. So to live as a united community, I mean, as nations or as states or whatever, in whatever form, we have to recognize the fundamental rights of people as citizens of Sri Lanka. They should have equal rights. I mean, unless that cannot be, if we cannot establish that, then there is no solution to the problems you raised. I mean, we can establish a truth commission. I mean, it was done before, but no results. Then the second thing is transitional justice mechanisms, because there have been so many missing persons. There are so many war widows in the North and East. There are other issues, properties. Still, there are issues remaining from the past. So we need to address all those issues, and those issues need to be brought to the table by the diaspora. We have to discuss among ourselves, okay, these are the issues and those issues need to be addressed. We can say in the transitional arrangements, when they build the new constitution, these are our proposals. I mean, I think as diaspora, that could be made a condition for, sort of whatever assistance we are going to provide to Sri Lanka, sort of that may be one of the way to go around.
Now we'll come to the Yoshita Rajapaksa's arrival in Melbourne, and there is a petition circulating around, now reach about 27,000 signatures, and the election is coming up. Chalana Francis actually started this petition. The main part of that petition is corrupted money laundering. So that person bringing the corrupted money to this country should be stopped. That's the main main put in that petition. Can you elaborate on that petition? And
now under international legislation, in the United Nations, sort of, if you look at, I can't remember the name of the particular regulation, but there is a provision for people to litigate with regard to money laundering, sort of issues, and then ask the governments where those ill-gotten wealth is invested, to confiscate those and return those wealth back to resources, back to the original countries where they were stolen from. Now, in this situation, we all know Rajapaksa family and other politicians as well, they have gathered so much of resources, and they have laundered those resources to overseas countries like Australia, Canada, United States, Uganda, Maldives, many countries. So what we thought is, sort of whether we could use this particular United Nations regulation, or rather the convention, to get this money back, because Sri Lanka is in a severe crisis. One of the things is we shouldn't have the expectations should be limited, in the sense, if you look at the situation in Philippines, right? When Marcos was expelled from Sri Lanka by the people, from the Philippines by the people, they had already stolen 5 billion to 10 billion US dollars. Now, until today, now Marcos's son is coming back to power in the Philippines. Yeah. Right? And until they could get only half that amount, I think about $3 billion. Still, there is a lot. So expectations shouldn't be managed. So we can't have large expectations, but this is a good opportunity to make the people abroad, not only Sri Lankans, non-Sri Lankan, to make them aware of what is happening in Sri Lanka on the one hand, and also not to allow laundering money from Sri Lanka to overseas. And if there are people who are involved in this money laundering operations, to blacklist them, sanction them, and then, after investigations, to send that money back to Sri Lanka. Now, there are a few catches in this situation. One is, although we can say it is the United Nations Convention, in Australia, for example, in other countries also similar situation, there are domestic legislation, right? In Australia, there is one. And AUSTRAC is the institution that tracks all financial transactions if there is money laundering and so on, right? But it is limited to the financial institutions like banks and other agencies that do financial transactions. And there is something in the Senate, I think it is yet to be decided, to extend that AUSTRAC field of investigation into real estate agents, accountants, and I think there are 8 or 9 categories of professionals that need to be tracked to see whether money is coming through those people. Investments are made. For example, we very well know in Australia, there are lots of investments that have been done by the Rajapaksas and other politicians, right? But then under whose name those properties are, and how these investments came to Australia, and who helped in these processes, because there are lots of people who have helped, right? Right? So those things need to be found out, and we have to provide those facts and figures to the Australian Federal Police, because they are the people who carry out investigations. And so that is, we have to do our basics. We have to make our people aware. Then we have to say, if this petition we are signing, if it reaches 50,000, then it will be discussed and debated in the parliament. That will come after the caretaker government, right? And when the parliament debates, we can influence, we can advocate that they should take some action about this. And we can, at the same time, if we have facts about this situation, we have to take it to the federal police and make a complaint, and then they can start investigating this further. And that is a long process, but we have to initiate that. So that is what we have done so far.
This point you mentioned, I would say, circulate among other communities as well. The Australian citizen should made aware of this particular thing. And also, someone said that they were going to do some protest about Roshita's arrival. Anything in that front?
It's a very sensitive thing. One is that we still don't know whether Yoshita Rajapaksa has arrived here, although there is circulation, social media messages to say that. Now, the latest I heard is that he is still in Singapore. But yesterday we got messages saying that he landed in Perth, and from Perth he came to Melbourne, and in Melbourne there are different places where he could be located. And there was a setup where some people wanted to go and protest in front of those houses, and which is not allowed under Australian law, right? This is not Sri Lanka. They have to understand that first. Right? Yes. We still live in Sri Lanka. Our mentality is in Sri Lanka. We have to come out of that. Right? Yeah. And there is a way of doing things in Australia. I mean, the system here is not 100% perfect, but still there is a lot of good things here, right? We can make a complaint. There is a way to do things, right? So that is why we started this petition process, sort of to make candidates aware of this situation, sitting MPs to be made aware of this situation, the non-Sri Lankan Australian citizens to be made aware of this situation. And then only we can create that environment. And if he is coming, what we are asking is, say, in Australia, sanctioned Russian oligarchs because of the Ukraine invasion, right? Now, if they can do it against Russian oligarchs, why can't they do that against Sri Lankan oligarchs? So we shouldn't go and do illegal things that will create not only personal problems, but also it will be badly reflected on the community itself.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely correct, because nowadays anyone can create any news and they can circulate, and it just travel very faster than in the past. I mean, so the social media is one way it is good to unite people. One way it's actually disturb everybody as well. Thank you very much, Lionel. I mean, the essence of this talk or the discussion, what I gather is we, the diaspora, can start the process, changing the system, or as you said, the constitutional changes. We should interfere or involve ourselves, regardless of Tamils or Sinhalese diaspora. That actually I get the message from your discussion, and we will work together. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. See you. நன்றி. லயனல் போப்பகே அவர்கள் எங்களோடு பேசியிருந்தார்கள். அவர் நீண்ட காலமாக இந்த துறையில் எங்களோடு தமிழ் போராட்டத்தை நியாயப்படுத்துபவராக பயணித்திருக்கிறார். அவரை பற்றி, அவருடைய கருத்துக்களை பற்றி ஆங்கிலத்தில் தான் இதை செய்யக்கூடியதாக இருந்தது. உங்கள் கருத்துக்களையும் தெரிவிக்கலாம்.
எங்கள் படைப்புகளை ஊக்குவிக்க மறக்காமல் சப்ஸ்கிரைப் செய்யுங்கள். உங்கள் உறவுகளுடன் ஷேர் பண்ணுங்கள். உங்கள் கருத்துக்களை காமெண்ட்ஸ் பகுதியில் பதிவிடுங்கள்.